She was sold by her stepfather to someone who wanted to put her to work on the streets, and her stepfather thought, this is easy money for me to sell my stepdaughter on the streets of Costa Rica. She recently was rescued, and she is at this safe house. Of course, we need to understand that these girls, they're tough. They're tough victims to work with. Talk to anybody. The numerous groups in the United States, especially working with these young women. They're hard victims. They're mad at the world. They have a lot of hate, anger. Of course they do. Who wouldn't, being treated this way from a mere infant? And so I just want to make it clear to Americans that these victims are hard to work with. But they are, understandably, we can see why they are in the situation that they are in. Why have they become victims? The reason, Mr. Speaker, boils down to one word: demand. There is a demand to abuse these young girls for money. And the demand, money, by the pimp selling the girl so he can get money, and the demand being the customer. There's three people in this scenario. There is the trafficker that's, goes around trafficking these young women, either domestically or internationally. There on the other end is the victim, and she is a victim. She is not a criminal. She is not a prostitute. She's forced into this conduct. But in the center is the person who demands that service and is willing to pay for it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time mentioning the demand and what needs to be done about that. Beatrice, she was 14, was brought to Costa Rica from Nicaragua, an internationally trafficked child, to work in a home, similar to the young lady that I mentioned in the Ukraine. Promised a job in another country. She's going to help her family. Good person. But she's trapped once she gets into that foreign country that is not what she's going to get as a job. But that's what she was promised, that you get a job in Costa Rica, you're from Nicaragua, you're poor, you don't have any money. I've got a job waiting for you in Costa Rica. So she goes, had the thought of helping her family out, and instead she was trapped into sex trafficking and forced into prostitution. She was sold in hotels, brothels, and luxury condos, and she had to have sex with men up to 17 times a day for money. She was gang raped by foreigners, and she was tortured into compliance by her pimp, and she was drugged so that she could comply. That is slavery, Mr. Speaker. Forced slavery in the name of money. There was a young mother from Mexico named Alma came to the United States to work in 2009. She, like many others who come here looking for a better opportunity, wanted to help her family. She paid a coyote to help her cross the border into my home state of Texas. Her ultimate destination was South Carolina, but the coyote wanted to stop in Houston for some other business. Alma arrived at what she thought was a safe house in my congressional district, in an area of what is called Spring Branch. She later discovered that this wasn't a safe house at all. She said it was a living hell, the home of a leader of a human trafficking ring in Houston, Texas. Alma and some others that had been trafficked were all told that they had to give the trafficker information, because the information they gave was about their families, so the trafficker could hold them for ransom because they were kidnapped. The trafficker made the ransom calls for to the families demanding money. The problem was with Alma, her parents, her family had no money. She was held in that safe house as a hostage in that prison, living hell, and she was sexually assaulted numerous times. The family, like I said, could not afford to pay any money, and so the trafficker used her as a sex slave, that she was sold to customers who had the demand for that activity. Eventually, though, she was arrested, and she was glad she was arrested. Law enforcement did a good job, went after the trafficker, got him, got Alma, rescued her. She believed that she would have been killed, or certainly further abused, had not she been rescued by the police. Other than the name, this is a real person, real victim, trafficked internationally into the United States. Unfortunately, many victims are not rescued. Some certainly are not rescued very quickly at all. And they face the daily abuse of being a slave. Who are the individuals that traffic these victims? Well, they cover a lot of individuals. You have the drug cartels, for example, and the criminal gangs. They traffic young women, and they do it for money as well. And the thing about using a sex slave, there's more money involved in sex slavery than there is bringing drugs into the United States. I mean, you bring drugs in the United States, it's a one-time deal. You get the money as the bad guy, and you're gone, you're captured, you go to prison. I used to be a judge. I sent a lot of them to prison. But with sex slavery, the trafficker has the ability to use the slave more than once, and there's a lot of money. And the risk of what punishment may happen to the trafficker is really less than in selling drugs. So you have the drug cartels, you have criminal gangs like the one I mentioned with Alma, you have individuals doing this, you have family members doing this, either trafficking these kids in their own country, or move them to foreign countries. And it's happening worldwide, Mr. Speaker. It's not just happening in a handful of countries. I don't know the estimate number of people trafficked throughout the world, but the numbers are staggering from what I do here. I'd like to mention one other person from Texas. Cheryl grew up in an abusive home. She was sexually and physically abused by her father. Her mother left when Cheryl was young to escape the abuse by this abusive male. So at the age of 12, Cheryl ran away, because some of these victims turn out to be started as runaways from home. She began hitchhiking with truck drivers and anyone else that would take her. This led her to end up being with a motorcycle group, a biker club, and she was taken advantage of by those individuals. One of those individuals became a trafficker. And so what happened to her after she left home at 12, she was forced to dance at a strip club by day, and then at night she was sold on the streets. She was in this world of human trafficking. She was not a criminal. She was a victim. We need to make sure that's understood. She had no idea how to get any help because of the abuse that the trafficker would instill on her if she tried to leave. It actually happened that she was performing at a strip club, and one of the patrons figured out she's not an adult. She was 15 by then, after all these 3 years of abuse. And one of the patrons helped her escape. It was a long road for recovery and restoration, but Cheryl's a survivor, and she has personally founded the mission of Serenity Ranch to help other victims of human trafficking. So those are some examples, Mr. Speaker, of some real individuals. When Ms. Hahn and myself were visiting those young girls in Costa Rica, their shelter, like I said, is the only one in the country. It's up in the mountains. It's hard to get to. We complained a little bit, I did, about the rough road